Good morning, everyone, ladies, gentlemen, and any dogs or cats that are out there watching. Today, we're going to talk about being a speaker, about learning how to present yourself to the public. And this applies to everyone. I often encourage my ladies to learn how to speak in public and get their act together on their business if they're going to be out there selling to people. And I wonder if you're ready to do that. I think after this conversation today on Nurturing Big Ideas today with me, Yvonne DiVita, you will be ready. My special guest is Anastasia Button, and she is an author, an international speaker and consultant, and something you may not have heard of before, a generational expert. Welcome, Anastasia.
Thank you for having me here today. I'm excited.
You know, the exciting thing for me is that you're a millennial, and I don't get too many. I mean, I know a lot of millennials, and I'm working my way up to getting them on the show. But the reality is, I just love millennials. I just think you guys have your act together. I hear a lot that you don't. I hear all this other stuff, which is a bunch of baloney. They say a lot of crazy things about baby boomers also. You tell me a little bit about how you came to create this wonderful thing, this author, international speaker, generational expert focus in your life, because to me, you're pretty young.
Right. I get that a lot, actually. I think I look younger than I actually am in some ways. But yes, I am a millennial, and I kind of fell into working with corporates on understanding how different generations work together, how they can learn how to create cross-generational leaders, as I call it. Yeah. And what that means is that we're able to be leaders amongst all generations, really facilitating a movement within the company itself. And it fosters great leadership, and it trickles and it duplicates, which is great. So I fell into this, it was about 2.5 years ago, really. I was already an author of an upcoming book at that time, actually. I wasn't out yet. And it's called #New Job, New Life. The Millennials Take Charge Plan for Success. And just because it had millennial in it, everyone was like, oh my gosh, we have to understand this crazy weird group called millennials. Please come help us. You know, it was really interesting how that happened. That's not how I started my business. It was actually around business coaching for millennial entrepreneurs. And I still do a lot of that today. But it was interesting. It was this big pull to come to companies and really help them understand millennials. Well, that led to actually being an adjunct professor at the University of Denver for executive education. Now, I didn't know that a lot of these private universities especially worked with a lot of these larger corporations like Comcast, Anadarko Oil and Gas, and they're their clients. So they facilitate adjunct professors and professors to go and like in-house consult and teach, basically. So that's kind of where they were like, hey, we want you to come in with this baby boomer, a good friend of mine named Brooke Chestnut. So it was a baby boomer and a millennial on the stage teaching about how cross generations can work together, how you can attract and facilitate, engage. And that's where it all started, but it lit like wildfire. Everybody was like, a baby boomer and a millennial. It was funny. I did like a graphic of him and I standing stage, and it was kind of cool because you got the old, the young, and you have the male and the female dynamic. You know, you got a nice corporate looking guy, and then you got a nice cute millennial. So it was funny because on the graphic, everybody was like, oh, I want to come see this battle. And I was like, whoa. You know, everybody thought we were going to hash it out on stage. And it was like, no, we're actually collaborating and cooperating. And we had this dual mentorship, as I call it. And we were teaching those things back into all the stages, going into all these companies and being asked to come to the Express Employment Professionals. They're a franchise. They actually asked us to come out and do a training over here in Colorado for their regional event. And it just really sparked out from there. And so I was so-called a generational expert for millennials, and then it turned into, well, I guess I better figure out all these other guys too, you know? And so that's where a lot of the dual mentorship really started happening into my life, and I was able to take a lot of those key aspects, as well as the research and the implications that I was putting in, to go to these corporations and really help them understand how they can foster cross-generational leadership to really not only create a happy workplace, but to also increase the bottom line of companies. But it's great because it also, they can take this into their own lives as well.
Mhm. Absolutely. It's fascinating to me that, I mean, it took off like wildfire. That's not, I can understand that. I can absolutely understand that, because there is a huge need for this kind of generational cooperation and collaboration. I know I have a lot to learn about being in the world today. I feel personally, and I think some of the other women I work with, we bring a lot of baggage with us that we shouldn't. We
Mm,
don't need to be so focused on this, that, or the other thing that may have held us back, or we imagine holding us back, because we have to be in the here and now. And I think that's where in the here and now, there's so much to learn from millennials, because you live so fully. You are not thinking the way we baby boomers, especially women. So I don't know about your baby boomer friend who's a man. He didn't go through the things I went through.
mhm.
But we baby boomer women, we can talk about it. We need to laugh about some of it, because some of it's funny, and it wasn't at the time, but it is now.
Right.
And we need to then say, what am I doing now? And how can I get together with someone like Anastasia? And so the two of us can say, set the world on fire, so to speak, because I focus on women. And I would love to see you do something with the baby boomer woman. Maybe we could do something together. But tell me how you created the hashtag and the book and everything, New Job, New Life. I mean, to me, when I saw that, it was like, that's amazing. That's awesome, because that's what I'm trying to help people. It isn't new jobs so much as reinvention. But tell me about how you did that, and tell me about the book.
Yeah, well, I kind of fell into that as well, funny enough. So it's interesting. I'm very much a believer in how the universe guides you to where you need to be if you're open to listen. And that's exactly what I took, right? And that was 2015. So it was about 5 years, somewhere in there, 4 years ago. Yeah. Anyway, back when I was actually a roofing contractor and I was knocking on doors trying to sell roofs to people who,
Whoa.
yeah, who didn't want me there, because I was the 50th person to knock on their door, because we have hail here in Colorado.
Yep.
And that's when the hail comes in, destroys all the roofs, and then you get like a locust amount of roofing contractors knocking on your
Right.
door. So I'm like knocking number 50 on this door, and they're not happy to see me. And so they're throwing, like, I'm not kidding, they're throwing shoes at me, they're throwing newspapers at me, they're threatening to throw hot coffee in my face, go get their guns and come out and get me. Like, it was nasty. And it was a horrible experience, because the person I was working for as well was taking money from me and my customers.
Oh,
So it was a horrible experience. And I was at this point where I was wanting to either jump off a roof rather than to knock on one more damn door. So I was just like, I got to get out of this thing. What do I want to do? Well, funny enough, at the time I was a Toastmaster, because I joined Toastmasters to improve my roofing
hello, hello.
sales. Yeah, right. And yeah, it really built a lot of confidence and really sparked this natural ability I have to speak. And so I said, this is what I want to do. I want to be a speaker. I have no idea what I'm going to talk about, but that's what I'm going to do. So I went and I quit the roofing sales. I closed out my jobs. And everybody was saying, in the Toastmasters world, if you want to be a public speaker and get paid for it, you need to have a book. And I'm like, oh, what? So I was like, okay. So again, the universe provides what you're really looking for when you listen. And I got an email from a friend saying, hey, there's going to be this boot camp where this author is going to be in town, or the publisher, excuse me, is going to be in town. And he's going to talk about how you can write a book and grow rich. And so I went to the event, and it was one of those ways to recruit business authors for them, because they partner. And I loved their spirit. I loved their ways. And I said, all right, this is the book I want to write. And they said, let's do it. And I was like, here we go. And so it was then where I really had to realize what I was going to write and talk about. And my heart really was with millennials, because as you've seen in the press and everything else, we do have this feeling of being lost and really needing to find a way to create great impact in the world. And I know what it's like when it's in this way where you're not feeling like you're creating impact, you're selling roofs instead. In my own way, that was not my way to create impact. And so I created this book, and I actually said New Job, New Life, the Millennials Take Charge Plan for Success. And my publisher was like, no, you're a millennial. Let's put a hashtag in front of it. And I was like, that's awesome. So immediately I already had my own hashtag moving forward when I started marketing the book. So that's how it all came about with the title and everything. But the book's purpose is all about helping millennials and anyone really. I had a baby boomer read it. She was like, I found my purpose, and I know now how to leverage it in my business. And that's really what it's about. It's really getting in alignment with your purpose so that you can create an impact on the world in the way that you see fit.
Yes, yes, exactly. And I'm glad you said that, because I think there is tremendous crossover between when you listen to the universe. It isn't something that's only for one generation. It isn't something that's only for women or men. It is a essence and an understanding that you have to find your purpose in your life. And if you are listening, and I actually write about this, so I'm glad you brought it up. I do write about it. I want women to understand that even if the universe is sending you a rock in your path, you have the power and the intelligence and the know-how to get around it or over it or whatever. And it doesn't mean I can't do it. So it's amazing that little short story. I have a similar story when I was your age, and I sold insurance. And it was awful. I had to go door to door. And I went to this one house, and it was a younger woman. She was probably my age. She was married. And I went in and I was talking to her about the insurance. And I think her husband came down from upstairs and started shouting at me, like, what are you doing in my house? And he's telling her, this woman is not, I mean, he called me names, and he insulted what I was trying to do. And it was this big scam, and how dare I come. And I'm like, whoa. So I never forgot that. And I left, and it was very demoralizing, because here I'm just trying to make a living, and people do buy insurance, and just say no. Just say no. But no, it was awful. So, it's not a unique thing to have experiences like that, but to be able to take that experience and say, I should be doing something else, and then have the universe say, well, you should write a book.
Right.
The whole write a book thing is fascinating, because writing a book it's both easy and hard. I've written a book. I'm working on another book. I was a publisher at one time.
Right.
So I coached women. So we published 21 titles, and I think 19 of them were by women, because that's my focus, is helping women get ahead. And it was probably one of the best things that I ever did. I mean, I moved on after that to another wonderful thing with my pet blogger community, but they were all women also. I mean, 80% of them were women. But in the end, did you find writing the book difficult, or did it just flow, or did you have someone help you with an outline, or how did you manage to do that? Because I'm telling you right now, I get free books all the time because of my past. And I'm lucky 90% of them are wonderful books. But every now and then I get a book self-published, and I don't mind that, because I approve of self-publishing. But really, did you have an editor? Did you do your due diligence? Tell me about your experience writing the book.
My experience writing the book is really unique, and maybe it's not as unique as I think, but I had an editor with my publisher. They took me through the whole experience. They did
Awesome.
the cover, everything. I just had to write the thing and sell the thing, really. So that was great. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because this was back in like April. It's going to sound really romantic, but I was like touring around Europe. I was on the train, and when I get these like hits of inspiration, like, oh, I remember this, and I have this pain usually, or I've had this experience that makes me feel vulnerable. Let me just share it on social media. And so it's like an exercise I do, and people really appreciate it. So one of the things I wrote about was, hi, I'm Anastasia Button. I'm a published author, and I can't write. And that has been one of my most successful, I guess you could say, blog posts out there. And it's written almost in like a poem format in my own way, because it is definitely a huge struggle I've had actually back in since grade school. I've been told I'm a B student. I can't write. You need to go to the tutoring office like 3 hours a day just to be able to write a paper that's appropriate, you know? And especially when you had British professors. So even worse. Um, I remember someone actually sitting me down in college and saying, Anastasia, you cannot write. You need to go to the tutoring office and, you know, work with them and then create a paper, because this is not going to work at all. So I didn't realize that, you know, it had all these signs, but it didn't sink in that, you know, I had a really big writing problem, and that actually transpired into the author journey as well. So it's really hard for me as an orator, that's naturally what I am, to actually put it down into the written word cohesively. I'm a heck of a lot better than I used to be, trust me, but it's still not quite up to par with my peers. And so going through this editing process was painful, I'm not going to lie, because I'm pretty sure, I never actually met this person, but I'm pretty sure it was a British editor who did not appreciate the fact that they had to edit this book that was just horrendous in a way.
Oh,
And yeah, and you know, I own it. It's totally cool. I work on it. I try, but it was tough. So I knew that the only way I could really overcome this obstacle I've been facing my entire life was to kind of go on like my own little retreat and just write the book. I did all my research. I knew the outlines. I kind of knew what I was going to say. But I took like a big box of wine and a big box of coffee. So I had my inspiration and motivation, and I like interchanged between the two. So that's all I drank, and pizza. That's all I ate for 3 days in a hotel in Glenwood Springs, which is in the mountains here in Colorado. And I just wrote. I just was like, just get it out, because if I don't do this now, it's never going to work. And so I just took 3 days, and I actually calculated how much time it took me to actually write the book. And my book's rather small compared to most. I don't think I was writing this huge novel like War and Peace. But I was writing, and I wrote for a total of 21 hours in 3 days.
holy cow.
That's all I did. I ate pizza, I drank wine, and I drank coffee. I'm pretty sure I was going on like some vision quest. I was probably so dehydrated, but I was like, let's just get this done, you know? And so, yeah, in 21 hours of writing, I got the book, like content completely done. And then I go back and edit every now and then.
Right.
I really worked with an editor for a good like 5 months after that, because I really needed the extra help. So, you know, when people ask me, how long did it take you to write the book? I say 21 hours, but in all reality, getting it to where it's readable, it took about 6 months.
Sure. And that, you know, that's short. It can take people years.
Yeah.
And I don't recommend years, especially in today's world. I mean, that's why I like self-publishing. When I wrote my book, it was about connecting with women on the internet who want to buy your products. And if I had waited for a publisher, the book would have been out of date when it came out, and the advice would have been out of date. I needed it to get out right away. But the other thing is, as you say, you wrote a blog post saying, I can't write. And that was really a confession kind of a thing. I will tell you, Anastasia, I was on the forefront of blogging for business and having, back in 2004, when people were still trying to figure out how to do this.
Right.
And the big question at Blog Her, the big women's blogging conference at the time, it was the only women's blogging conference. The big question was, how much personal content should I put on my blog? How much can I actually tell people or share with people? And it didn't come about because people were wondering about business. We were still learning about how to write to achieve clients or prospects or whatever. We were still all learning that. It wasn't even about how much do I write there so I can go speak or anything. It was at that time, it was a lesbian gay thing. They were the ones saying, how much do I share? And we have come so far now to being more authentic and honest And I do say to people there, you don't need to share everything. I mean, you have to have a certain line that you're not going to cross. And depending on your audience, I mean, if you're writing for a certain audience, then you write what you know that audience wants to hear. But it's exciting to me that you didn't have to go through that. You kind of felt confident enough to say, I'm going to share this story because it's relevant to millennials perhaps, but relevant to the whole community of man, so to speak. And do you think, where do you think the line is today then? Because your honesty and authenticity comes from growing up with the web. You know, I did.
Yeah. You know, I think that's a really good question, because the more vulnerable my posts get, like I just did a post this week about how I had to file for bankruptcy because of all of the debt that false mentors really pushed me on in roofing sales. It was horrible. And I did this huge, like, as you could say, almost like a confession in a way. And it was this thing that I was just kind of like sitting with, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to say what happened, what I learned, and how this may inspire you as well. And, you know, I think that's kind of how it needs to be taken as. It's when you're looking to put content out and you're looking to get vulnerable and you're looking to put some personal stuff out there, like bankruptcy. No one likes talking about that. And so it's like, it's just not a thing, and especially in our culture. And so when you put these kind of things out, it's more of the intention of what you're trying to do, right? A lot of people say, oh, if I just get really vulnerable and put it out there, it's just saying a message. It's like, but it has to have a message with intention, right? So when I do these posts that get vulnerable, it's all about inspiring you to say, it's okay. I am still a good person. I am still moving forward. And I'm going to learn how to let go so I can now accept more into my life. And, you know, when you say those kinds of things, rather than just like, here's my sob story, right?
Absolutely.
People really start to see the transformation that you experienced, which also gives them the idea and the inspiration for them to have a transformation experience as well. It's the same thing as speaking or writing a book. You know, you're giving them a way to have some sort of transformation. If that's courage, or if that's the step-by-steps, whatever that may be, it's all about the intention of what you're putting in vulnerability. Like for me, I know some people, they'll put out their, and you know, kind of goes with their market, but I know someone on social media where he's putting out very detailed sexual experiences and how others can have those as well. That's not my realm. That's my line. I'm like, no. At the same time, is it relevant to what I'm trying to do, what my impact in this world is, right? And so it just kind of varies. But I do feel that this world is getting more and more exposed to ideas that we wanted to put behind closed doors, right? Divorce was a big thing. LGBTQ was a big one that you mentioned. Bankruptcy, financials, gender equality, sexual harassment, you know, all of these things that people are now openly talking about, which I feel is very healthy. As long as it has, again, intention and it's not, here's my sob story.
True. So very true. I think many of us in my age group, we still have the hesitation to say things like that or share things like that, because we were brought up not only just, you don't talk about that, that's not, you don't tell, but what will my mother think?
Right.
What will my sisters think? I wrote a blog post about my mom, who was at the time had to change from nursing home to nursing home to nursing home because of finances. We just didn't have the money to put her in a wonderful place. She was in a very good place, don't get me wrong. But I felt like, gosh, every year she had to go to a different place because something happened that she had to be moved. And I wrote the blog post about how it was like, maybe she felt like a piece of luggage being taken from one place. And my sisters went bananas on me. They just came down on my head and said, how dare you say that? Why would you say that? We treat her very well. I said, I never accused you of doing this. I was trying to make a point to the general public about how we treat our senior citizens. But And so I crossed the
Mhm.
line when I didn't mean to, but I was trying to put out the message that, we have to treat our senior citizens better. And it flopped really big in my family. So do you have that? Do you worry about what your friends' family are going to say or think?
I had a similar experience actually early on when I just started really blogging, and I can now post this blog post because my grandparents are both passed now. But it was when my grandfather passed, I was really inspired to tell a story called "What's in Your Toolbox." He was a big construction guy, always built his own stuff. Like he was an engineer, focused kind of person. And so he had this massive tool shed. And when he passed, or when they were actually moving or downsizing, he was like giving it to the neighborhood. He was like, here, come have my tools. And everybody knew him because he had all the tools. And so they all came by and grabbed all these tools. And it was his way of giving back to the community, because with his age and with his new location, he wasn't going to use them. So with all of that, the stories I was hearing about people who got a stomper from my grandpa because he came over one time to help them build a fence, I was so inspired by these stories. So I wrote a blog post, and then my grandmother, who was not online very much,
Right,
I
right,
sent her
right.
an email of the blog post, and she read it, and she was very upset.
Dude.
She was like, you put his name out there, you even said the road in Boulder, and he's like, everybody on that road. It was like she thought that everybody was reading this when no one was. And so I was going, I am so sorry. This was not my intention. So I took it down. And after she passed, I felt it was okay to start saying these stories. For her, it was an invasion of privacy. So,
Right.
something to really think about. If it's about other people, I always go and ask permission now. For my sister, she's adopted and into our family. And I was like, hey, I would love to tell a little bit about your story and how it can inspire others. And she said no. And so I was like, so I'm glad I asked. so, you know, so I was like, do you want that? Because she would really rile up. So I was like, did not want that to happen. So if it's a story about others, be a little bit more cautious and ask for permission and what your
Right.
intention with the story is. If it's about you, obviously you can have all of that out
Sometimes it
there.
is about you, and they're just
Yeah.
tangential to it. You can't not include them. You can give them a name. You can make them like, I didn't use your name. It wasn't you. People won't know. People will know. But so
Yeah.
it is. It is a unique thing for those of us who want to share these authentic stories, but really have to ask the family member or the friend or whatever. It happens to novelists. So when you're writing a novel, if you put a character in there that someone in your family thinks sounds like them, you're in big trouble. And they teach you in journalism school, at least they taught us, you have to say, too bad for you. This is the book. It wasn't meant to be you. You go sit in a corner and be quiet, because you have to write. I mean, Stephen King says that. He says, you cannot let other people dictate how you write your book if it's a novel. So it's very interesting, the whole writing, the whole speaking. I'm so excited that you mentioned Toastmasters. We can't get into it right now because we're coming to the end of our time, but Toastmasters is a wonderful thing for people to experience, and it does teach them how to speak well and give them confidence. How long were you in Toastmasters?
I was on Toastmasters for 2 full years.
Good.
And I remember I tell people who are in Toastmasters, you want to definitely get to a point where you graduate Toastmasters, and come back when you need to and stuff. But there's a point where if you're wanting to be a public speaker, that is, there's a point where you need to graduate. And I was at that point after 2 years. I told one of my mentors in there, he'd been a Toastmaster for 10 years because he just really loves it. And that's cool too. But I said, I really feel my time needs to go elsewhere. I feel I've learned, not everything, of course, but I've learned what I needed to learn here. And it's time for me to move on.
That's
And he
awesome.
said, this, it was so great. He's like, you were the first person in 10 years who has told me that, because many have, that I agree with. And I was like, it was a great validation. And yeah, it taught me more about confidence in myself and verifying I can do this versus just learning necessarily how to speak. That's definitely a benefit you get. But it was more about getting confidence by being exposed on stage. And again, it's a place of vulnerability. That's why a lot of people are so afraid of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a wonderful thing to do. I definitely say go do Toastmasters. If you've never joined before, even if you're a seasoned speaker, go, because it's really going to help you in a lot of ways. But I do feel if speaking especially is your deal, there is a time to graduate.
I have never heard that before. That's really insightful, because Tom and I, my husband, were in Toastmasters for a couple years back we lived in Rochester, New York for all of our lives, Buffalo, Rochester, and then we moved to Colorado, and I miss Colorado so much. And then we moved
We miss
back
you too.
because of the grandchildren, and
Yeah.
so we're so delighted and happy to be back here with them. But Toastmasters was awesome, and I will tell you that I was not ready to graduate. We left and we didn't do Toastmasters in Colorado. Probably we should get back to it, because I have done public speaking, but I think there's so much that I could do better. And when someone recognizes that, gosh, I do it, but I'm not as good as I could be, that's a big step forward, don't you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I would recommend. So ladies, we Anastasia, I really wish we could continue talking. I love the stories. I think there's so much, again, between the things that we baby boomers know, learn, have done, and the things that you have and you experience and you are bringing now to the world of entrepreneurship. I think that's amazing. So thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thanks for having me.
Do this again. I don't know, my throat, excuse me, everyone. Do it again soon. But in the meantime, this is Yvonne DiVita, Nurture Big Ideas today. My Smart Woman conversation was with Anastasia Button. All of the information, again, will be on the blog. Go to the blog and see what else you can learn about Anastasia, and watch this and share it with all your friends. Thank you.